A very good noon to one and all. Today I am going to start about the new unit, gear measurement. So in this lecture we will cover the introduction about the gears and what are the types of gears and what is gear terminology and gear manufacturing processes and what are the sources of errors in the gears and the measurement of spur gear. Now we will start the first topic, so introduction to gears. Okay, so these are very important transmission elements to transmit the power. So they are positive in action, that means there is no slippage. In case of belt drive there is a chance of slippage, whereas in the gear drive it is a positive transmission and exact speed ratio can be achieved by using these gears. So transmission efficiency in the case of gears is almost 99%, but it depends on the actual compliance with the specified dimensions of the gear. So here we can see a tooth of spur gear and some of the terms also we can see. So this is a face and the flank of a tooth and bottom land of the tooth. Now what we can observe here is a particular profile of the tooth. So and different profiles are used. Normally cycloidal profile and involute profiles are used. So forms of teeth. So here we can see an involute profile. So we will discuss about these profiles in details. The different forms or profiles of teeth normally used are cycloidal and involute teeth. So cycloidal profile is it is a curve traced by a point on the circumference of a circle which rolls without slipping on a fixed straight line. For example, say we have a fixed straight line and then we have a wheel which will rotate, which will roll on the fixed line without any slippage. Now we consider a point on the circumference. So for example, we have a fixed straight line and then we have a wheel which will rotate, which will roll on this fixed line without any slippage. Now we consider a point on the circumference. So when we roll the wheel, what is the path followed by this particular point? So this profile is called a cycloid. So when a circle or a roller rolls without slipping on the outside of a fixed circle, the curve traced by the point on the circumference of a rolling circle is known as a epicycloid. Okay, so on the other hand, if the circle rolls without slipping on the inside of a fixed circle, then the curve traced by a point on the circumference of a rolling circle is called hypocycloid. Now you can see, let us learn how to construct a cycloidal path. And you can see here we have a fixed circle known as a pitch circle, and then we have a rolling circle C which rolls on the outside of the pitch circle, and we have another circle D which rolls inside the pitch circle. Now the cycloidal teeth of gear may be constructed as shown in this figure. The circle C is this circle is called is rolled. The circle is rolled without slipping on the outside of the pitch circle on the point P. Okay, so we have a point P here on the circumference of the circle C. The point P on the circle C traces epicycloid, the PA. So you can see here when it rolls in the direction it traces a path PA. So this PA represents the face of the cycloidal teeth, and then the circle D, the second circle, so which rolls inside the fixed circle. The circle D is rolled on the inside of a fixed circle on the point P. Again, we consider the same point. The point P on the circle D traces hypocycloid PB. So when it rolls in this direction, the point P traces this path PB, so which represents the flank of the tooth profile. So in this figure, you can understand what is the face of the tooth and what is the flank of the tooth. So the profile BPA, and the profile BPA is one side of the cycloidal tooth. The opposite side, that is BPA, the opposite side of the tooth is traced in similar manner. Now when we combine the two profiles BP dash A dash and BPA, and when we join A and A dash with the curve, then this becomes one tooth of a gear. Okay, once again I am saying that, so we consider the same point. The point P on the circle D traces hypocycloid PB. So when it rolls in the direction, the point P traces the path PB, which represents the flank of the tooth profile. So in this figure, you can understand what is the face of the tooth and what is the flank of the tooth. So the profile BPA, and the profile BPA is one side of the cycloidal tooth. The opposite side, that is B dash P dash A dash. So the opposite side of the tooth is traced in the similar manner. Now when we combine the two profiles B dash P dash A dash and BPA, and when we join A and A dash with a curve, then this becomes one tooth of gear. So now how do we construct an involute tooth? So this is about the construction of cycloidal profile. Now we will try to understand what is involute profile and how to construct involute profile. So we can see we have a base circle, and then we have a tangent TT. So in this involute profile, the tangent is rolled over the base circle without any slippage, and we consider a point A on the TT. When the tangent TT rolls over the base circle, so what is the path traced by the fixed point A? So that becomes the involute profile and the involute of a circle. So it is a plane curve generated by a point on the tangent which rolls on circle, base circle in the case of gear. So in the case of gear, without slipping, or it is a point generated by A, so it is a curve generated by the point on a stiff string which is unwrapped from a reel as shown in this figure. So now let us study how to construct the involute profile. So let A be the starting point. We have the starting point A here, and the base circle is divided into equal number of parts AP1, P1, P2, and P2, P3, like this. So the base circle is divided into equal number of parts. Then the tangents at P1, P2, etc. are drawn. You can see here at a point A we have a tangent TT, and at a point P1 and P1 again we have another tangent A1 P1, and at a point P2 we have another tangent A2 P2. So that is tangents at P1 P2 etc. are drawn, and the lengths P1 A1 P2 A2 etc. equal to the arcs AP1 AP2 etc. are marked. Then by joining the points A, A1, A2, A3 etc., we get the involute curve. So this is the involute curve. Now what are the advantages of involute profiles or gears with involute profiles in actual practice, involute gears are most commonly used due to the following advantages. The most important advantage of involute profile gear is that the central distance for a pair of involute gears can be varied within a certain limits without changing the velocity ratio. That is not true with cycloidal gear, which requires exact center distance to be maintained. In the involute gears, the pressure angle remains constant throughout the engagement of the teeth. That means from the beginning of engagement till the end of engagement, the pressure angle remains constant. So we will discuss about the pressure angle later. The pressure angle remains constant throughout the engagement of the teeth, which is necessary for smooth running and less wear of gears. But in the case of cycloidal gears, the pressure angle is maximum at the beginning of engagement, and it reduces to zero at pitch point, and again it becomes a maximum at the end of the engagement. Hence, the running of the gears with the cycloidal profile is not much smooth. So then the face and flank of involute teeth are generated by a single curve. Whereas in the case of cycloidal gears, double curve is epicycloid and hypocycloid are required for the face and flank respectively. Thus, the involute teeth are easy to manufacture than the cycloidal teeth. In the involute system, the basic rack has a stripped teeth, and the same can be cut with a simple tools. The only disadvantage of the involute teeth is that the interference occurs. So, with pinions having the smaller number of teeth. This may be avoided by altering the heights of addendum and dedendum of mating teeth, or the angle of obliquity of the teeth. Now, let us move on to the various types of gears. Different gears are available. So, first one is spur gear. So, it is very commonly used type of gear is spur gear. So, it is having radial teeth parallel to the axis. So, we have the axis and the gear axis and the teeth are parallel to the gear axis. So axis and gear axis, and the teeth are parallel to the gear axis, and the teeth are straight and are mounted on the parallel shafts. So if you want to transmit the power, we have a shaft here over which a gear is mounted, and then we have another shaft with another mating gear. So it means the gears are mounted on parallel shafts. If the shafts are at some inclination, then spur gears cannot be used. Sometimes many spur gears are used at once to create a very large gear reductions. So each time a gear tooth engages a tooth on the other gear, that means when the gears are rotating, so we have the teeth of one gear, and then we have the teeth of another gear. So when it rotates like this tooth will impact on this tooth, mating tooth. That means there is a collision between the teeth, mating teeth. So this impact makes a noise. It also increases the stress on the gear teeth. So they are normally used in electric screwdrivers, oscillating sprinklers, and washing machines, and cloth dryers, etc. So the other type of this is about the spur gear, and the other type of gear is helical gear. So the teeth on the helical gears are cut at an angle to the face of the gear. So we can see here the teeth, they are at some inclination, some angle is provided. When the two teeth on the helical gear system engage, the contact starts at one end of the tooth and gradually spreads as a gears rotate until the second two teeth are in full engagement. So this gradual engagement makes helical gears operate much more smoothly and quietly than the spur gears. In the case of spur gear, there will be impact from one tooth to other. So whereas in the case of helical gears, since the engagement is gradual, there is no impact and noise is very less. So for this reason, helical gears are used in the car transmissions. You can see here there is a single helical gear. The bigger one is called gear and the smaller one is called pinion. And here we have a parallel configuration. That means the two axes they are parallel to each other. And here crossed configuration, we can see we have the axis and one axis here and other one axis here, and here we have a C double helical gears. We can see the angle in this fashion as well as in the other direction. So there is a double helical gear. Okay, now we have another kind called bevel gears. So bevel gears are used to connect shafts which intersects usually but not necessarily at 90 degrees. So we have one axis here and another one also there. So the angle is 90 degrees. So when the shafts are like this, then we can go for bevel gears. So it is not necessary that it should be 90 degrees. It can be lesser than that also. The teeth on the bevel gear are subjected to much the same action as like spur gear teeth. So bevel gears are not interchangeable, and in consequence they are always designed in pairs. We can see here we have straight bevel gears, and here the teeth are straight, whereas here the spiral bevel gears there is a curve and teeth are curved. So this type is called hypoid gears. Okay, so we have a rack and pinion type. You can see here the picture. The straight toothed bar is called rack and the smaller wheel is called pinion. The rack and pinion gears are used to convert rotation into linear motion. So when the pinion rotates, then the rack moves linearly. So the pinion is a small gear, the teeth of which it fits into those of larger gear or those of rack. Then we have a diagram here, diagram of rack here. So we have the pitch line and then the addendum, dedendum, and the pressure angle, etc. And the great terminology we will discuss it later. Now we have another type called worm gear. So the picture shows the worm gear. A worm drive is a gearing arrangement in which a worm which looks like a screw. So this is called a worm. The worm meshes with the other wheel called worm wheel. So this bigger one is called a worm wheel. Worm drive reduces the rotational speed and it allows a higher torque to be transmitted. Now we will move to the anti-backlash gear. You can see this figure. We have a split gears. So we have this one part here and other part also there. So split parts are there, split gears are there. These are designed for precision applications. For example, radio tuning dial. These springs are used for tensioning the gears, and then to eliminate the backlash, plastic, brass, stainless steel, and aluminum are the most normally used materials for manufacturing the anti-backlash gear. So they are available in the spur, bevel, and worm gears. So these anti-backlash gears, they are very minimal backlash. So wherever a very precision transmission is needed, for example CNC machine tools, in these anti-backlash gears are very much used. So this diagram shows the anti-backlash gear. So we have a two parts of a gear and the two halves of a split scissor gear. So they rotate slightly in opposite directions to increase the tooth thickness. One is spring loaded and the two halves of a split scissor gear rotates slightly in opposite directions to increase the tooth thickness. So in this diagram, it is a split. So there is a slight relative motion between the one part and the other part, so thereby increasing the tooth thickness. So this is the tooth thickness. So when the tooth thickness increases, it reduces the backlash. So we have a composite gears also there. A composite gear containing a plastic center. So at the center we have a plastic material, and on either side we have a metallic material, and the plastic center with a slightly thicker profile than the metal teeth. So the thickness of the plastic teeth is highly more when compared to the tooth thickness of the metal part. So this will also help in reducing the backlash. So here we have see different kinds of gears, the combination of gears and compound gears, and then gears with keyways. So different types are used depending upon the applications. Okay. Now move on to the gear nomenclature. So what are the various terms used to discuss about the gear? So you can see here we have a two teeth here, and this is a profile of a tooth. Either involute profile or cycloidal profile is used to make the gears. So this portion, there is a portion and the face width. So the face of a tooth and the flank also there, and the bottom land is there, and the distance from there is face width is there. So there is a top land, and then we have a curve passing through the top land. So this called a addendum circle, and then we have another imaginary circle called pitch circle. So pitch circle, if we observe here, we have a tooth thickness, that means that is a material thickness which equals to the width of the space. So such a way we have to write the pitch circle, and the distance from the point to the corresponding point on the next tooth is called circular pitch, and the radial distance from the pitch circle to the addendum circle is called addendum. And we have an dedendum circle which will pass through the root. So there is a addendum circle, and the radial distance between the dedendum circle and the pitch circle is known as a dedendum. Then we have a clearance circle here, and then we have a small fillet radius, and there is a clearance. So it is a gap between the clearance circle and the dedendum circle. Now pitch circle is a theoretical circle upon which all calculations are based. So pitch circles of mating gears are tangential to each other, and then pinion is smaller of the two mating gears. Here you can see a mating gear. The bigger one is called gear, and the smaller one is called pinion. The circular pitch is equal to the sum of two thicknesses. This is the circular pitch, which equals to the sum of tooth thickness and the width of space measured along the pitch circle. Diametral pitch is the ratio of number of teeth to the pitch diameter. It's called a pitch circle diameter. A module is a very common term, is used in the gears. So the module is the ratio of pitch diameter to the number of teeth. Okay, then we have a addendum is the radial distance from the top land to the pitch circle, and the dedendum is a radial distance from the bottom land to the pitch circle. The whole depth is the sum of addendum and dedendum. So the depth of the tooth profile, that means depth of tooth. So here clearance circle. So we have the clearance circle. So clearance circle is the circle that is tangent to the addendum. So it is the tangent to the addendum circle of mating gear. So clearance is the amount by which the dedendum in the given gear exceeds the addendum of its mating gear. And the most commonly we use another term, that is backlash. So it is the amount by which the width of tooth space exceeds the thickness of the engaging tooth. So there will be another engaging tooth between these two. So there will be a small gap which is also known as a backlash. So it is the amount by which the width of a tooth space exceeds the thickness of engaging tooth measured on the pitch circle. Now we will discuss about the pressure angle. So it is also known as angle of obliquity. So it is the angle between the common normal and common normal to the two gear teeth at the point of contact and common tangent at the pitch point. It is usually denoted by this particular symbol, which it is like gamma. And the standard pressure angles used in the manufacture are 14 and half and 20 degrees. So the pitch circle, it is an imaginary circle which by pure rolling action would give the same motion as a actual gear. Then we have the pitch circle diameter. So it is the diameter of pitch circle. The size of gear is usually specified by the pitch circle diameter, which is also known as pitch diameter. Then the pitch point is a common point of contact between two pitch circles. So you can see some more terminologies here. We have a gear and a pinion mating together, and the distance from the center of the pinion to the center of gear. So this distance is called center distance. And you can see here the pressure angle and the line of action and the base circle. So there is a root diameter, and then we have a circular tooth thickness. So it is measured on the pitch line. So you can observe in the case of gear tooth. So there is a gear tooth. So in the case of gear tooth, the thickness will be varying. The thickness will be varying from tooth to tooth. So here you can see this is a thickness. There is a thickness. As we move down from top land to the bottom land, the thickness of tooth is varying. So when we want to measure the tooth thickness, we should know at what depth we want to measure the thickness, at what pitch circle, at the pitch circle. So we have the thickness which is called a circular tooth thickness or caudal tooth thickness. Okay. So what is the caudal tooth thickness means? If you want to measure the tooth thickness, we should know at what depth we want to measure the thickness at the pitch circle. So we have the thickness which is called a circular tooth thickness or caudal tooth thickness. Okay. I hope everyone understand this thickness. Now under machining we have two methods of machining gears. The first one is reproducing method, and we have another type, it is a generative method, that means generating method. So reproducing method, in which the cutting tool is a form cutter, that means the form that is available on the cutter is reproduced on the blank. So it forms the gear teeth profiles by producing the shape of cutter itself. So in this method, each tooth space is cut independently of the other tooth spaces. So schematically you can see here the cutter is rotating as well as it is moving up and down, and so at the time one tooth will be cut. You can see this figure of reproduction method. So this is cutter and the gear blank is there. Now the second method of machining is generating method, so in which the cutting tool forms the profiles of several teeth simultaneously. So in this case several teeth are cut simultaneously during constant relative motion of tool and blank. So there is a gear blank on which we want to make the gear, and there is no hob and the gear cutter, and the direction of hob feed also you can see, and the gear blank is rotated simultaneously. So this is about the various machining methods. So in the gear manufacturing process, we can make the gears by forming the operations, which is a chipless operation, or we can machine the gears in the forming process. Different methods are available, and casting methods. If the gear is very big, then we can cast the big gears, and then by centering also we can make the gears. Injection molding process and extruding process and cold working process, cold drawing process are there. So if you want very thin gears, we can stamp the gears and performing and forging. So there are different forming operations by which we can make the gears. And coming to the machining of gears, we have a roughing operations and finishing operations here. In roughing machining operations, we can make gears by form milling, rack generation, and gear shaping operation, hobbing operations. So like this we can make the gears by rough machining, and we can finish them by different operations called gear shaving, gear grinding, burnishing, lapping, and honing process. So the various methods like reproducing method and generating method. So by using this we can manufacture the gears. Okay, so I hope everyone understand this. So the source of errors in the reproducing method are which have incorrect profile on the cutting tool. That means we have selected a cutting tool which is having incorrect profile, so that incorrect profile will be reproduced on the blank, and hence we get a wrong or some error in the gear. So incorrect positioning of the tool in relation to the work, that means the profile angle, proper orientation, proper depth are not given during the machining operation, and incorrect indexing of the blank. So improper indexing arrangement also leads to error in the gear. So in case of generating method, the errors in the manufacture of cutting tool, and again the cutting tool is improper or it is having some error, so we get error in the gear, that is cut errors in position of the tool in relation to the work. That means improper orientation of tool and work, and the errors in the relative motion of the tool and blank. The relative motions between the blank and tool are not correct, so they are not rotating at required orientation or speeds or whatever it is. So hence we get error in the gear. So these are the various sources of errors in the gear manufacturing. So now let us study what is the need of gear measurement. So why do we want to measure the various gear elements? So to compare the capability of different suppliers, we are procuring the gears from different suppliers, and we want to access which supplier is supplying better gears. So when we want to access the suppliers, it is necessary that we should go for gear measurement. So identify why gears are failing. 90% of premature failures have excessive geometrical errors. So to identify what is the reason for failure, and we need to measure the gear and to identify the causes of manufacturing errors and why the error is occurring. So to identify that, we have to measure the gears. So to minimize the noise from the gear set, poor specification or manufacturing or gear causes the noise. So when the gears are made to the specification, we can always reduce the noise to increase the potential power density. The accurate gears transmit more power to achieve the accurate transmission and a good transmission. So we need to check whether the gears are proper or not. To benchmark suppliers manufacturing capability, so whenever we are in the process of benchmarking the suppliers, we need to measure the gears. So to minimize the product through life cost, to increase the competitiveness. So when we are the manufacturer of gears, we want to increase the competitiveness, so we have to produce good gears. So it is very essential that we should access the quality of gears produced to prove that gears are supplied to the specification. So to check whether all gears are made to specification or not, or if there are any errors, if the errors, how to eliminate. To study those things, we need to measure the gears. To reduce the premature failure risk, also we need to measure the gears. Okay, now we will move to the gear tooth measurement, and different methods are available to measure the tooth thickness. So one very commonly measured parameter in the case of gear is gear tooth thickness, and the thickness gear tooth thickness can be measured by various methods, by using the gear tooth vernier caliper, by constant chord method, and the use of base tangent method, and by measuring the dimensions over the pins. So there are some of the methods available for measurement for gear tooth. Now we will study the first method, that is a measurement of tooth by gear tooth vernier caliper. So we have seen the conventional vernier caliper, where in there we will only one main scale and one vernier scale, whereas in the gear tooth vernier caliper, so you can see here we have a one horizontal scale and then we have a one vertical scale also is there. Okay. So two scales, horizontal scale and two vertical scale are available. So we have one set of jaws. You can see the jaws. We have one set of jaws, and here you can see there is a blade, or sometimes it is called a tongue. So we have a blade here which will move up and down. So this blade can move up and down, and the jaw opening can be adjusted by moving the horizontal part of the vernier caliper. Now we should know at what depth we want to measure the thickness. So this thickness, the tooth thickness is varying at different depths. So we should know at what depth we want to measure. So that depth we should fix here by moving the blade. The tongue should be moved up and down, and the depth should be adjusted, and then by using the after the adjusting tongue, the gear tooth caliper is placed on the gear tooth, which is to be inspected, and then the jaw should be moved and the thickness should be measured. If the caudal tooth thickness is to be measured, then we should find what is the value of this caudal height, and then that value should be fixed, and then we can measure the thickness, that is caudal thickness. So this figure shows a gear tooth vernier caliper. You can see these jaws here. We have two jaws, and then we have the horizontal scale with the vernier, and then we have a vertical scale with the vernier here, and this is blade or a tongue which will move up and down. Now you can see this geometry of gear tooth. So we have a pitch circle, and there is a top line, and this O is the center of gear, and OA is a radius, and then C to D. So this is point D, and C to D is the depth, and then A to B. A to B is the caudal thickness, so which is termed as W. So we should calculate what is the value of D, that means small d, and then we should move tongue, and then we can measure the value of capital W, which is caudal thickness. Now the tooth thickness is generally measured at a pitch circle, since the gear tooth thickness varies from tip to the base circle. The tooth thickness is measured at a specified depth on the tooth. Normally at a pitch circle it is measured. The gear tooth vernier caliper has two vernier scales as already discussed. The vernier caliper, the vertical vernier scale is used to set the depth from the top surface of tooth, that is top line, at which the width is to be measured. After fixing small d, we can measure the caudal thickness. The horizontal vernier scale is used to measure the width of the teeth. Now we can see we have considered one tooth here. The theoretical values of capital W and small d can be found out. Then the values are verified by the instrument from the figure, and the capital W is ADB, and the W equal to ADB. But the tooth thickness, this W, small w is a chord, and ADB is the chord, but the tooth thickness is specified as an arc distance AEB. So we have capital A, and we have capital E here, and we have a B, capital B, and AEB is arc on the pitch circle. The tooth thickness is specified as an arc distance AEB. Also, the depth small d adjusted on the instrument is slightly greater than the addendum CE. So this distance from the top line to the point capital E on the pitch circle, this is addendum, whereas the d, small d, is slightly greater than the addendum. So small d is more than the addendum by the amount ED. Width W is therefore called chordal thickness, and the d is a chordal addendum. The accuracy of measurement is limited by the least count of instrument, which is normally it is 0.05 mm, and the wear is normally concentrated on the two jaws. They get worn out more quickly. Now from this geometry, from the triangle ADO we have W equal to 2AD, that is AD plus DV. This is ADV, 2AD, so which is equal to the 2 into AO sin theta. So using this geometry we can derive this equation for W, that is chordal thickness, so which is equal to nm sin 90 by n, where n is a number of teeth, and r is a pitch circle radius. So OA equal to capital R, so which is a pitch circle radius, and small m is the module, and n is the number of teeth. Now also from this geometry, so here we have the D, chordal addendum, equal to OC minus OD. So the chordal depth equal to OC minus OD, and then we can derive the equation for small d by using this relationship. So D, that is chordal depth or chordal addendum, that equal to nm by 2 into 1 plus 2 by n minus cos of 90 by n. So where m is a module and n is the number of teeth. So we can understand from this derivation, that is W and D, they depend on the number of teeth and module. Okay, so if the number of teeth varies, then again we have to calculate what is the W under T under D. So we will solve one numerical problem. So an example numerical problem, calculate the gear tooth vernier caliper settings to measure the chordal thickness of gear having 45 teeth having a module of 4. So the data given, that is given is module m equal to 4, and the number of tooth capital N equal to 45, and we have to calculate gear tooth vernier caliper setting, that means what is the depth. So this gear tooth profile, we want to measure pitch line, and we want to measure the chordal thickness. So there is a chordal thickness W. So we should find out what is the value of D, and which can be set in the vernier caliper, and then we can measure the W. So the chordal depth nm by 2 into 1 plus 2 by m n minus cos of 90 by n. So which we derived here, and now we can see capital D equal to nm by 2 1 plus of 2 by n minus cos of 90 by n. So we have to feed the values of n and m, and n is 45, okay, and 45 into 4, and m is 4, 45 into 4 by 2 in bracket 1 plus 2 by n means 45 minus cos of 90 by n 45. So this will give the value of 4.086 mm. So this value we have to set in the vernier caliper. So the D, that is pitch circle, and then caudal thickness. So this is D equal to 4.086. So we have to move the tongue of the vernier caliper and we have to adjust this 4.086 mm in the instrument, and then we can measure the thickness. So the theoretical value of thickness, tooth thickness, caudal tooth thickness, that equal to nm sin 90 by n. So n is 45 teeth and m is 4. So 45 into 4 into sin 90 by 45 mm. So this will give a value of 6.28 mm. So caudal thickness is 6.28 mm. So this we can verify by using the vernier and gear tooth vernier caliper. So with this we will conclude this session. So in this session we discussed about the introduction about the gears and what are the different types of gears manufactured and how they are manufactured, and what are the various terms used in relation to gear, and how the gear tooth thickness can be measured by using the gear tooth vernier. And we also saw the numerical problem, and we will in the next class we will discuss about the some of the methods, another methods we are using for the gear measurement. So I hope everyone understand this introduction and a very important concept about the gear measurement. So please read well and stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.